Complete audio summary of interview with the vampire by Anne Rice. First published April 12, 1976. Warning, spoilers ahead. Read to you at Book Nook. The story begins with the vampire meeting a young journalist in a small, dimly lit room on Divisadero Street. The vampire appears thoughtful as he stands by the window, observing the passing cars. The journalist, eager to conduct the interview, sets up his recording equipment and assures the vampire that he has enough tape to capture a compelling story. The vampire, intrigued by the proposition, expresses his willingness to recount his life story, beginning with his human life in the late 18th century in Louisiana. The young man is captivated by the vampire's demeanor and story, showing no fear despite the supernatural nature of the encounter. The vampire introduces himself as Louis de Point du Lac and begins narrating his tale. In his human life, he was a wealthy plantation owner, grappling with grief over the recent death of his brother. Louis's brother had experienced visions and claimed divine revelations, insisting that Louis should sell the family estate and move to France to support his calling. When Louis dismissed these claims, his brother tragically fell to his death, leaving Louis racked with guilt. The plantation became a source of torment, a reminder of his loss, and Louis descended into despair, seeking solace in reckless behavior and dangerous situations, including frequenting taverns and brothels. One fateful evening, Louis's life changed when he encountered Lestat de Lioncourt, a vampire drawn to Louis's beauty and melancholy. Lestat offered Louis the gift of immortality, but it was not presented as a choice. Lestat desired Louis for companionship and access to his wealth. After a harrowing confrontation, Lestat turned Louis into a vampire, plunging him into a new existence. The transformation was both euphoric and agonizing, with Louis experiencing heightened senses and an insatiable thirst for blood. As the process concluded, he found himself irrevocably changed, tethered to Lestat as his maker. Louis struggled to adapt to his new life, repulsed by the idea of taking human lives to sustain himself. Lestat, on the other hand, reveled in his vampiric nature, exhibiting no qualms about killing humans and mocking Louis's moral reservations. Their relationship became strained as Louis resisted, embracing the predatory instincts Lestat insisted were intrinsic to their kind. Lestat took pleasure in taunting Louis, belittling his humanity, and displaying a casual cruelty that both fascinated and repelled Louis. To avoid suspicion, Lestat convinced Louis to maintain ownership of his plantation, where they resided together. Their nocturnal activities drew attention from the enslaved workers on the estate, who whispered about supernatural occurrences and grew increasingly fearful of their masters. Tensions escalated when Louis's reluctance to feed on humans became untenable. Lestat, impatient with Louis's resistance, forced him to witness and partake in feeding, demonstrating the necessity of killing to survive. One night, Louis reached a breaking point and, in a fit of rage, burned down the plantation, severing ties to his human past. Amid the chaos, he and Lestat fled to New Orleans, where they could blend into the vibrant, bustling city. In New Orleans, Louis struggled to reconcile his identity as a vampire, torn between his lingering humanity and the instincts of his new existence. He continued to rely on Lestat for guidance, despite their growing animosity. As they roamed the city, Louis began to understand the complexity of their kind. Lestat revealed snippets of vampire lore, but withheld critical knowledge, asserting control over Louis by keeping him dependent. Despite Lestat's manipulative tendencies, Louis found himself drawn to him, fascinated by his boldness and unshakable confidence. Their dynamic was fraught with tension, each pushing the other to their limits. One evening, Louis wandered the streets of New Orleans, consumed by existential despair. He encountered a young girl named Claudia, who was crying over the death of her mother from plague. Overcome with compassion and hunger, Louis fed on Claudia, leaving her near death. Lestat found Louis in this vulnerable moment and, recognizing an opportunity, turned Claudia into a vampire, binding her to them both. Lestat's decision was calculated. He believed that creating a child vampire would secure Louis's loyalty and provide them with a semblance of family. Claudia's transformation marked a turning point in Louis's story. She adapted quickly to her vampiric nature, displaying a ferocity and cunning that belied her childlike appearance. Her presence brought a temporary harmony to their existence, as she shared an affectionate bond with Louis while admiring Lestat's ruthlessness. However, her childlike form became a source of anguish as decades passed, and her mind matured while her body remained frozen in time. The story continues with Louis, Lestat, and Claudia living together in New Orleans. Their existence as a makeshift family becomes increasingly strained as Claudia's intelligence and personality mature, creating tension within their dynamic. Claudia, though outwardly appearing as a child, develops an adult's awareness and intellect, leading to frustrations with her perpetual childlike body. Her growing bitterness and resentment begin to manifest, particularly toward Lestat, whom she views as manipulative and cruel. Claudia starts questioning her origins and the nature of her transformation. She confronts Louis and Lestat, demanding answers about why she was turned into a vampire and what her purpose is. Lestat dismisses her concerns, treating her questions with condescension, while Louis struggles with guilt and shame over his role in her creation. This only deepens Claudia's animosity toward Lestat, as she begins to see him as a tyrant who robbed her of the possibility of a normal life. Despite her resentment, she remains dependent on both Lestat and Louis, creating a volatile dynamic in their household. Over time, Claudia grows increasingly cunning and manipulative, using her perceived innocence to her advantage. She begins planning her escape from Lestat's control, determined to free herself from his influence. Claudia's intelligence and resourcefulness become evident as she studies Lestat's habits and vulnerabilities, devising ways to overpower him. Meanwhile, Louis remains conflicted, torn between his loyalty to Lestat and his growing empathy for Claudia's plight. He becomes a confidant for Claudia, who shares her frustrations and dreams of a life beyond their current existence. Tensions reach a breaking point when Claudia presents Lestat with a poisoned boy as a gift. She tricks Lestat into feeding on the boy, whose blood has been laced with laudanum. The drug incapacitates Lestat, leaving him vulnerable. Seizing the opportunity, Claudia slits Lestat's throat and ensures that his body is disposed of in a nearby swamp. She believes this act of defiance will liberate her and Louis from Lestat's control, allowing them to start a new life together. Claudia's actions shock Louis, who is both horrified by her ruthlessness and relieved by the possibility of freedom. With Lestat seemingly eliminated, Louis and Claudia begin making plans to leave New Orleans. They seek out information about other vampires, hoping to find others of their kind who might provide guidance or companionship. Their search leads them to Europe, where they hope to uncover the origins of vampirism and the answers to their existential questions. Before departing, Louis and Claudia burn down their New Orleans home, symbolically severing their ties to the past and ensuring that no evidence of their existence remains. The journey to Europe marks a new chapter in their lives, as they navigate unfamiliar territories and encounter new challenges. Louis becomes increasingly introspective, reflecting on his existence and the moral implications of his actions. He questions the nature of immortality and whether it is a gift or a curse. Claudia, on the other hand, is driven by her determination to find other vampires and gain a deeper understanding of her own nature. In Europe, they travel through various cities and villages, searching for signs of other vampires. Their journey is marked by a sense of isolation, as they struggle to connect with the human world while remaining unseen. They encounter rumors and legends about vampires, but no concrete evidence of others like them. The isolation takes a toll on Claudia, who becomes increasingly frustrated and impatient with their lack of progress. Eventually, Louis and Claudia arrive in Paris, where they encounter a coven of vampires led by Armand, an enigmatic and charismatic figure. The coven operates out of the Theatre de Vampires, a theater that stages macabre performances for human audiences, using their vampiric abilities to create illusions of death and horror. Louis and Claudia are intrigued by the coven and their theatrical lifestyle, which contrasts sharply with their own experiences. Armand takes a particular interest in Louis, drawn to his introspective and moral nature. He offers Louis a sense of companionship and guidance, presenting himself as a mentor who can help him navigate the complexities of vampiric existence. Louis is captivated by Armand's wisdom and allure, feeling a connection he has never experienced with Lestat or Claudia. This connection creates tension between Louis and Claudia, who views Armand with suspicion and jealousy. As Louis becomes closer to Armand, Claudia begins to feel increasingly isolated and threatened. She fears that Louis will abandon her in favor of Armand, leaving her alone in a world she does not fully understand. Desperate to secure her future, Claudia makes a bold and unprecedented request. She asks Louis to create a companion for her, someone who will provide her with the companionship and protection she feels she can no longer rely on from Louis. Claudia's request forces Louis to confront his own moral boundaries and the consequences of creating another vampire. Louis reluctantly agrees to Claudia's request, and they choose a woman named Madeline, who is grieving the loss of her child. Claudia believes Madeline's maternal instincts and shared pain will make her a suitable companion. Louis turns Madeline into a vampire, marking a significant and troubling moment in his journey. The act solidifies Claudia's independence, but also deepens Louis's internal conflict as he grapples with the ethical implications of his actions. The arrival of Madeline further disrupts the dynamic between Louis, Claudia, and the Parisian coven. Armand, who has been closely observing their actions, expresses concern about the creation of a new vampire and warns Louis about the dangers of their decisions. The coven becomes increasingly suspicious of Louis and Claudia, particularly after learning about their history with Lestat. The revelation of Lestat's presumed death and their role in it leads to growing animosity among the coven members, who view the act as a betrayal of vampiric laws and traditions. The story resumes with Louis, Claudia, and Madeline living under increasing scrutiny from the Parisian vampire coven. Claudia grows more anxious and distrustful, aware that their unusual family and the circumstances of Lestat's supposed death have drawn unwanted attention. Louis, while torn between his allegiance to Claudia and his growing connection to Armand, remains protective of her and Madeline, though his own doubts about their survival begin to surface. The tension among the characters intensifies as Armand subtly influences Louis, planting seeds of doubt about Claudia's actions and the sustainability of their bond. One fateful evening, the coven's hostility culminates in an open confrontation. Led by Santiago, a flamboyant and menacing member of the Theatre de Vampires, the coven accuses Louis and Claudia of violating vampiric laws. The murder of a fellow vampire, even one as divisive as Lestat, is considered a grave offense, punishable by death. Despite Louis's protests and attempts to explain their actions, Santiago and the other coven members dismiss their defense, claiming that no vampire has the right to take the life of another. Armand, though present, remains silent, offering no intervention to protect Louis and Claudia. Louis and Claudia are forcibly separated. Claudia and Madeline are imprisoned in an open courtyard with no protection from the sun, a death sentence for vampires. Louis is locked away in a coffin, left to await his fate. As dawn breaks, Claudia and Madeline are exposed to the sunlight, and Louis, trapped and powerless, can only imagine the horrific end they face. When he is eventually released by Armand, he discovers the ashes of Claudia and Madeline in the courtyard, their deaths confirming his worst fears. The loss of Claudia, who had been his closest companion and a source of deep emotional connection, leaves Louis devastated. Armand, claiming to act in Louis's best interests, offers him solace and guidance. He suggests that Louis can find a new purpose and companionship by staying with him. However, Louis, overcome with grief and rage, becomes consumed by a desire for revenge against the Theatre de Vampires. His love for Claudia and his guilt over her death drive him to take drastic action. Armand, while not explicitly endorsing Louis's plans, refrains from stopping him, silently condoning the destruction that follows. Louis sets the Theatre de Vampires ablaze, using fire to exact his vengeance. As the flames engulf the theater, he ensures that no vampire inside escapes, eliminating Santiago and the other members of the coven. The Inferno also symbolizes the destruction of a corrupt and oppressive system that had judged and condemned Claudia without mercy. Armand aids Louis in escaping the aftermath, and the two flee Paris together. Despite their shared flight, Louis feels increasingly detached from Armand, unable to fully trust him or forgive his earlier inaction. Over the following years, Louis and Armand travel together, exploring the remnants of the vampire world. Armand attempts to mentor Louis, offering insights into vampiric philosophy and history. However, Louis remains emotionally distant, haunted by memories of Claudia and Madeline. He finds little solace in Armand's company, as their perspectives on life and immortality differ greatly. Armand, who embodies acceptance of the vampiric condition, struggles to connect with Louis, whose moral anguish and longing for humanity persist. Louis eventually separates from Armand, choosing a solitary existence. He wanders the world, observing humanity from the shadows but rarely interacting with others. The passing decades bring technological and cultural changes, yet Louis finds himself unable to fully adapt. His immortality, once a source of fascination, becomes a burden as he witnesses the ephemeral nature of human life and the loss of everything he once held dear. The memories of Claudia and the events in Paris continue to weigh heavily on him, shaping his melancholic outlook. In the modern era, Louis returns to New Orleans, the city of his origins. He revisits familiar locations, now changed by time, and reflects on the cyclical nature of his existence. To his shock, he encounters Lestat, who has survived Claudia's attack and the subsequent events. Lestat, weakened and diminished, is a shadow of his former self, having spent years in isolation and despair. The reunion is fraught with tension, as Louis confronts the specter of his past and the man who had such a profound impact on his life. Lestat, despite his weakened state, attempts to rekindle their relationship, expressing a longing for the companionship they once shared. He appeals to Louis's sense of nostalgia, recounting their shared history and the bond they once had. However, Louis, hardened by his experiences, rejects Lestat's overtures, unwilling to return to the toxic dynamic that had defined their earlier relationship. The encounter serves as a reminder of the unresolved conflicts and enduring pain that Lestat represents. Louis's narrative concludes with his reflections on the nature of immortality and the choices he has made. He expresses a sense of detachment from the world, acknowledging the isolation that comes with his condition. Despite the loss and suffering he has endured, Louis remains introspective, seeking meaning in his continued existence. His story, as told to the young journalist, serves as a testament to the complexities of life as a vampire and the moral dilemmas that accompany it. As the interview ends, the journalist, captivated by Louis's story, expresses a desire to become a vampire himself. He sees immortality as an opportunity for adventure and power, dismissing the suffering and loneliness Louis has described. Louis, angered by the journalist's naivety, lashes out, revealing his vampiric nature in a terrifying display. The journalist flees in fear, leaving Louis alone once again. The story closes with Louis contemplating his future, uncertain of what lies ahead but resigned to the solitude that defines his existence. The end. I used to love this book when I was young, so I certainly hope you have enjoyed this summary. If you liked it, please subscribe so I can keep uploading even more books. Also, giving me a like helps a lot. I will probably be doing a summary of the rest of the series, but if you would like me to summarize any specific book, please write me it in the comments. Also, if you have seen the new series, please let me know if you liked it.